I'm interested in marijuana toxicity because I would like to see the American people and others be able to think about the use of a substance that has some risks but still can be thought of in a rational, proper fashion instead of a evangelical, terrified one. I'm not interested, interestingly enough, in marijuana as a recreational drug because I'm not interested in my personal use of it. But all of these other things intrigue me.
Dr. Morgan points to a recent survey conducted by Harvard University of 1,000 leading U.S. cancer specialists.
They asked these specialists if they had heard of cannabis as an anti-nauseant, as a drug to prevent nausea and vomiting. They asked them if they had ever recommended it to their patients, and they asked them if they thought it should be available. The outcome was quite surprising, I think, to many people. Over half of those respondents stated that they would like cannabis to be available and that they would prescribe it to their patients if it were available. And furthermore, half of them said they had already recommended it to their patients. The American government has effectively prevented most research in terms of marijuana, particularly in hopes of finding a therapeutic application. One can get funding for marijuana research if one's interested in showing the drug is harmful. Then there's significant amounts of money available, and that constitutes most marijuana research in the United States. We're only beginning to try to obtain funding to do therapeutic marijuana trials.
We're talking about one of the most valuable medicines, natural plant medicines in the world, marijuana, good for glaucoma, epilepsy, asthma, menstrual cramps, insomnia, eating disorders, muscle spasms, and the pharmaceutical industry is allowed to run propaganda saying that it's no good. And no one is presenting the other side of the story. We're the only source of information about the benefits of the plant.
Steve Hagar is editor of High Times, the only magazine in the world devoted to challenging the conventional view of marijuana.
High Times is the front lines of the opposition against the drug war. And really what the government fears is the information about marijuana, the real information about it. And to a certain extent, we do glorify the plant, but at the same time, we don't want to mislead people. Marijuana stimulates the learning and memory centers of your brain. It's a very sensitive part of your brain. It's not something I think children should be engaging in.
They think it wrong, politically and morally, that hundreds of thousands of young people are arrested for marijuana possession, and I think the law is a greater danger to them than the dangers of the drug.
One of the few countries to challenge the prohibition of marijuana is the Netherlands. Here in Holland, the hemp fiber industry is being revived by the government, which has invested more than $15 million in researching non-drug varieties of hemp. It's no coincidence this policy came about in a country with Europe's most tolerant attitude to the recreational use of marijuana.
We cannot win the war on drugs, and we don't want to criminalize the uses of drugs, especially the uses of soft drugs. In Holland, we have seen no increase when we regulated soft drugs. So you're always to suspect politicians making too much a point of this drug issue.
Heo van der Werf is a senior agronomist with the Dutch Agricultural Technology Organization. He is among 40 scientists who have spent 3 years researching the viability of hemp as a solution to a number of problems caused by Holland's intensive agriculture.
Well, I'm very enthusiastic about hemp, because hemp is a little bit a crop which has been of declining importance for 200 or 300 years. It's very nice to be able to help a revival of such an old and useful crop. This is the seed, and it contains proteins and oil. Proteins can be used as a foodstuff for humans or animals. 1 month ago I was in the Hemp Research Institute of the Ukraine, and my salad dressing was hemp oil, and it can be used as a dryer for making paint or things like that.
But the Dutch found hemp's greatest potential in paper making and have been testing the fibre using various pulping methods. In this process, the raw fibre is placed in a grinder where heat and pressure pulverise it into a fine pulp. The fibre is then mixed with water in this scaled-down demonstration of the paper-making process. As the water drains, the fibres coalesce, producing a sheet of hemp pulp. Anything made from wood pulp can be made from hemp, from cardboard to newspapers, from tissue to Bible paper. Holland recycles an impressive 70% of its waste paper, but the more paper is recycled, the weaker it becomes. The inherent strength of hemp fibre makes it an ideal pulp to reinforce recycled papers. It's a market niche worth billions of dollars annually. A sawmiller's daughter, Patsy Harmsen, also looks to hemp as a viable substitute for trees in paper making. She sees it as a potential saviour of Tasmania's fast disappearing old-growth forests.
When Dad went into the bush to get saw logs, everything was left intact. You couldn't tell where they'd been to get the logs, and the undergrowth thrived and the animals thrived, and there was very little disturbance. So the love of the forests was a very, very important starting point for me. And the next one was outrage when I realised that in fact wood wasn't the best material for making paper. It's certainly been turned into wonderful paper by people who've poured heaps of energy and heaps of chemicals into it, but it is not a natural fibre for paper. And the best natural fibres are in fact annual farm crops, like, and especially hemp and flax as well. I can't believe that anyone could ban a plant that's absolutely natural and wonderful and put here for everyone to use with thousands of uses.
With the harvest of their third experimental crop, Patsy is determined to prove hemp can be used as a replacement fibre in Tasmania's massive pulp industry. Harvest is a family day, with sons, daughters and friends all helping out. Despite the crop's negligible THC content, the drug squad insisted the flowering heads be destroyed for fear they might be passed off as high THC cannabis on the illegal market. Part of this crop is earmarked for the research laboratories of Australian newsprint mills, Australia's largest supplier of newsprint paper. A&M consumes over 500,000 tonnes of trees every year, but that's only a fraction of the 9 million tonnes felled in Australia annually for pulp and wood chips. In fact, the timber in this yard is only enough to fill Australia's newsprint needs for one day. With the controversy surrounding the logging of old-growth forests, A&M has recently moved to plantations for its fibre input. But pine and eucalypt pulps need a stronger fibre to reinforce them, and the company spends $20 million each year importing bales of craft pulp made from spruce trees.
This particular one comes from...
Len Johnson, A&M's technical manager, believes locally grown hemp may have the potential to replace this expensive import.
Fibres going up here. Now, you have to add that to newsprint to make it strong enough to handle.
Originally we wanted to see hemp being able to replace all grades of paper, but really we have to be realistic, so we were wondering if it could start off an industry perhaps by replacing this very expensive craft softwood pulp because of its extremely long fibre and strength characteristics.
Believe me, it is possible, and this sort of material can be made, a material somewhat like this can be made from hemp and it can be added to our pulp, and it would be an asset. It would be an asset to Tasmania too, by the way, wouldn't it? Be a great boom.
While A&M has shown considerable interest in investigating hemp as an alternative to kraft pulp, their research is still in its early stages. The short-term problem for hemp is that global prices for wood pulp are artificially low, making competition difficult.